So the Hamilton Khaki Field King Automatic, bit of a mouthful, but this watch is a simple watch and it's straight to the point. It gets so many things right, and what we're going to cover in this video is a little bit of the pedigree and history behind Hamilton, how they went from being an American-owned company and sold in 1974 to what is now known as the Swatch Group, which own many companies. There's a lot of interesting stuff I'm going to discuss regards to the movement in this watch, which is very good, reliable workhorse movement, which has an 80-hour power reserve, which is really good, and many other aspects about this watch which works so well, which I'm going to cover in this video, and I hope you enjoy. I'll see you in a moment. Now, as tradition goes, I must begin the video review with discussing the stats and the specs. So let's get started. Well, the first thing we need to do is get GPAS in for the assistance of this task, and GPAS gives us the weight. Now this watch is only 73 grams on a leather strap, and ballpark figure, anything less than 100 is going to feel really light, and this is great for a stainless steel cased automatic watch, so that's a good start. Now we're going to need assistance with Minch, who will give us all the dimensions you're going to need to know. So start with the case size. The case diameter across there is 40 mil. Lug to lug is under your 50. Anything less than 50 I think is going to wear really well for the average man's wrist, as long as the lugs conform nicely, which they do on this. Thickness is only 11.2, but that is partially impacted by this domed sapphire here. I will verify that that's sapphire shortly. The lug width is 20 mil for easy strap changes, and it's in proportion to the size of this watch. And then you've got the dial size is about 30 mil. And the reason why that's good is you've only got approximately 5 mil of bezel straight away either side, and that's it. No extra bulk or unnecessary waste, and that allows for this to be a really well proportioned watch, which is fantastic. So I'm going to show you now. I'm going to use the diamond selector to verify. Make sure your finger's on the conductive plate on the other side, and then you have to have it at 90 degrees to the crystal. Gently press it on and you'll see it gives a reading. So there we go. And then the back, the exhibition case back, as you see there's no change to the reading. So that is mineral on the back. So I feel I've covered all the dimensions. 316L stainless steel case, and we know the sapphire crystal, mineral on the back for the exhibition case back, leather strap, which is nice and thick with sealed edges. It's a really good start. So let's move in a little bit deeper. Let's dive inside this watch and discuss the movement. Now this is known as the Hamilton H40 movement, and I'll show you that by flipping over. Now Hamilton owned by the Swatch Group. They also own ETA, the ETA. The movements are Swiss made, and they are very, very popular, and there's many different reasons why, because they do reliable movements that are versatile enough to be adjusted, modified, changed, and they don't have too many problems. Now, the movement in this one was based on the ETA 2834-2, and that originally was actually a high beat Swiss movement, 28,800 beats per hour. It's still a 25 jaw movement, but only had a 38-hour power reserve. So what Hamilton have done for this movement is, obviously there's the visual modification you can see with the Hamilton branded rotor. But what they've done is they've changed aspects of the movement. I think it's the mainspring is made out of silicon, and that effectively allows for a lot more efficient release of energy when it's been fully wound, and this is why you get an 80-hour power reserve, which is really useful actually. If you wear this watch all week and then you have a long weekend where you want to wear something else, you can then put this back on after the long weekend, and it's still keeping time, and it's still wound enough for you to put it back on and carry on, no issues. And it's quite a practical and nice little feature to have. And they've proven to be very, very good at keeping time. And I apologise for not having my timekeeper and my time grapher ready to tell you how accurate this one is, because this is a watch on loan, my good friend Jim, and I will return this, and I don't want him waiting just for me to get my time grapher. But if he's still got it when my time grapher arrives, I will retime it and post a post on my channel, so give you an idea of how accurate these movements are. So that's a good movement to have in a day-to-day, everyday wear watch, I must say. Now you get the day and the date complication. As you can see here, sort of chopped into the 12 o'clock position. You've got the really big day indicator, and then you've got the the date as well. So no screw down crown on here, so you pop it straight out to time adjust. So I'm going to show you, I'm going to wind forward now to show you them ticking over. You see we've got hacking, so you see the second hand has stopped just before the beginning of the day. So I'm going to go forward, bang on 12 o'clock, or nearest, damn it, 12 o'clock snaps instantly to the next day. It's really nice. So what I'm going to do is show you how easy it is to change that. We'll go forward enough so we're not going to mess the movement up at all. I'm going to do the day and the date adjust, which is just first click out, turn it that way. So forwards is for the date indicator, and rotate it towards you for the day. And it's weird, it's not immediate, it sort of does a sort of a half turn then jump. So you have to, as you're turning it, you see it goes halfway and then keep going until it snaps over. So I like that. I know it slightly upsets the symmetry of the design on the dial, but I also think it adds a bit of interest. What could have effectively been a relatively bland dial design, which is partly one of the flaws you get with field style watches. It's crucial to have legibility, but it's also nice to have that added complication on there, which is just makes it look a bit more interesting, to be honest with you. Now, the way I'm showing you the loom today, I've done a time lapse of the loom on this watch because the loom isn't great. So I'm showing you two little time lapse videos to show you how quick it can do, how it degrades and what holds on. And I'm also going to show you how it compares to the best watch in my current stash of watches, how well it compares to that. So you get an idea of how a good dive watch, which should have really good loom, compares to a field style watch, which I think should still have good loom, but unfortunately this one doesn't. Let's take a closer look. So now you've seen that, I'm going to just have a little quick fly through some history actually. I think it'd be helpful to get a better understanding behind the relevance of this watch. I'm going to pop pictures up as I chat, just to give you an idea of what is really cool about Hamilton's history. It all started in 1892 in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, with pocket watches, and moved on to making watches for the railroad, because that was incredibly important for accuracy in 1912, because there was lots of accidents during that time. So railroad accuracy was important. In America, they used Hamiltons. And then they officially were in 1914 the supplier to the US Armed Forces in World War One, and that prompted the change to wristwatches as a far more practical way of keeping time for crucial missions. Very, very important. And then 1918, it actually accompanied the first US airmail, which was between Washington DC and New York City. Very good. Then another important milestone, 1926, Admiral E. Byrd was the first aviator to reach the North Pole, and he was using a Hamilton timepiece. Then there's been little bits along the way, such as in 1927, flight from California to Hawaii, a Hamilton was worn. 1930s, official watch for 4 major US airlines, and in 1942 it was the official watch supplied US Armed Forces during the World War II, and they gave 1 million timepieces during that period. And they stopped production for the public sale. It was effectively, they just focused on supplying the military, which is awesome. 57, they provided the world with the first electrical battery watch, which is the Ventura. 61, Elvis wore the Ventura in the film Blue Hawaii. 68, Hamilton created watches for the film 2001 Space Odyssey. So it's kind of pioneers in quirky and individual design, which obviously we saw with the Ventura. And 1969, integral role in the first auto chrono movement, which was a caliber 11. And then 1970, they were the first people to make the digital watch, which was a Hamilton Pulsar time computer. Then in 1974, they sold out to the SSIH, which is now known as the Swatch Group, and that was on May 16th. So that's when things really changed, sort of the ownership. But they've continued on with that legacy, that history, that pedigree, which is they've steeped in history with regards to aviation, and obviously incredibly strongly with military presence with the US Armed Forces. And that is continuing today. So if you want something with all that pedigree, history, and with a decent spec, that's why Hamilton, I think, are worthy of being in a collection, because it's nice to be able to have all that kind of story to tell, all that presence in time, that they have been making watches for crucial parts in history, and still buy something that's going to remind you of that. But it's also so wearable. So speaking of wearable, let's get this on my wrist. So I have a 7-inch wrist for reference. As you can see how that lug to lug is important. It's just about on the cusp of acceptable, being just under 50 mil, because I have a 7-inch wrist. And if you go much longer, it ends up the watch looking, again, too long for your wrist. But it's 11 mil thickness, including that dome sapphire, is spot on for it feeling really slim on your wrist. It's so light, as I said, under 100 grams. It slips under your cuff if you're wearing it. It's a great watch to wear in the winter when you're wearing coats and jumpers and your sleeves, you want long sleeves on all the time. It doesn't snag on the watch, and that is actually a crucial aspect of a field style watch, and that is not having it snag on your clothing and your wrist and no sharp edges anywhere. And it's very legible. Shame the loom isn't as good as it could be to help with the legibility during poor light conditions, but I think it's still acceptable. But they could do better. Being a Swiss watch, they are renowned for having decent loom, and they could have loaded a few more layers on. I really think they could have. I do like that date and date complication. Adds interest, even though it breaks the symmetry of the dial by sort of knocking that 24 number at the 12 o'clock position down to looking a bit weird. But the rest of the dial is really well proportioned. I love the length of the hands, those lovely syringe hands. They line up in the right places. Look at the length of the hour hand. You've got that extra sort of dimension in the dial. It's almost like an old record, you know, with this lovely design in the hour track where the Arabics are. Lovely little lines in there. And look at the length of the hour hand, bang on, lining up with the edge of that inner ring. Then you've got the minute hand, stretches out beautifully, bang on, touching the other side of the numbers on this minute track. Perfect. And look at the seconds hand, absolutely beautifully right in the middle of ticking along, lining up with the seconds markers. Swiss made as well. Lovely. Really lovely, well proportioned aspects of a watch really help with the aesthetic of a piece, because if something just looks a bit off and a bit out, it does affect your overall impression of a piece. Because if you've got hands that are too small, it can make the dial look a bit like it's lost, you know, things are lost in the overall proportion. But everything in this watch is really well proportioned, even though the symmetry has been slightly affected, as I mentioned earlier with the Saturday 23 positioned at the moment at 12 o'clock. It does knock it off a bit, but not enough to make it ugly. It works, in my opinion. What do you guys think? I think it's a pretty watch. Now I'll take this back off again. Oh, actually, I'm going to show you first. Look, I've 7-inch wrist, and there's a lot more scope to go smaller, but not much more scope to go bigger. It's only 2 more holes. It's just about big enough for me. So if you've got bigger wrists than 7 inches, you're very likely to want to change the strap out. It's a decent enough strap. I mean, it's nice, and it's very thick, and I think that, so as you see, it's the right thickness there, right thickness to align with the design of the lugs, and then it gets a little bit thinner towards the end. But I think it works really well with the design of the watch. If you're going to change it out, get a strap that's going to maybe match this colorway, because it's a black dial. That color is going to work with so many different types of straps, so there's no biggie if you want to change that out. Oh, my lights just died. Oh my god. We'll carry on. We'll power through. So I think I've been fairly thorough. I've covered the history, I've discussed the movement, the stats, the specs, the design aspect, which I think is what makes this watch work aesthetically so well. I think it's a gorgeous piece, and I really appreciate Jim lending it to me, and I'd love to hear what you guys think. And don't forget to like and subscribe if you haven't already, and drop us a comment on what you think could beat this as a Swiss-made field watch with this much heritage and pedigree for less than 500. I'd like to hear about it. Thanks for watching, guys. I'll see you in the next one. Bye for now.